Coming up next on Starkville, we will have the legend Nolan Ryan weighing in on The Miz. The Express or The Miz? We'll find out. And of course, we will take you to Vegas without Elvis for our Strange But True. And we are absolutely honored to have Jerry Dipoto from the front office of the Seattle Mariners to share his insight on baseball and how to run a team.
Greetings and welcome to Starkville. I am Jayson Stark. I write about baseball for The Athletic. And you know who I'm joined by? That guy again, my good friend, writer, substacker, a man who once got 1,100 hits in the major leagues, and our voice of baseball on ESPN Radio, Doug Glanville. Doug, how are you this week, my friend? You had some family celebration stuff going on, right?
Yeah, man. I mean, it was different. You know, usually I'm coming from some city Sunday, Monday. As you know, red eyes have been banned in Starkville. It's against the law. So, but this year, this week took off because my son graduated from high school. So that is our first, who got over the hump, and then kind of all of a sudden, like 17 years, like washes over you. So, but it was cool. My mom came in from North Carolina, a lot of family, and it's been a festive week. We had a party as well. So, it's surreal, kind of surreal. So,
it really is.
But that was big. That was big. I mean, just think, I've been at ESPN 17 years, and that's his whole life. It's just hard to fathom, man.
He has no idea what happened before then, but you'll be happy to remind him. I know.
That I will do. That I will do.
Yeah. So no Starks graduated from anything that I know of this week, but there was excitement around here because I think one of our most fun shows of the year is coming up. Jerry Dipoto, who is the president of baseball operations of the Mariners, is going to join us. Jerry is so much fun to talk to, as you know, Doug. We'll ask him about his team. We'll try to convince him to make a trade on the show. And we're going to let you in on a thing that he is greater at than anyone else in baseball, bar none. You don't want to miss that. We also have a crazy Strange But True segment. Baseball in Vegas is so wacky, and I can't wait to talk about it. But to be honest, Doug, I might have buried the lead, because you know what I did this week? I got to talk to a guy I'm going to guess you've heard of. His name is Nolan Ryan. Okay, so here's why. A week ago, you remember Jacob Misiorowski? We talked a lot about him last week. He pitched one of the most dominating games ever pitched. It was 15 strikeouts and 1 hit and no runs and no 3-ball counts. And he faced the minimum, and he only threw 95 pitches in what we call a Maddox. And nobody has ever done that. And so after that game, it felt like a lot of people were saying, wow, it was like watching a young Nolan Ryan. So what did I do? Yeah. I called the actual Nolan Ryan.
Yes.
Right? For a story I just wrote in The Athletic. Check it out. Nolan, of course, was incredibly gracious. He said the Miz has a gift. He has the best arm that he's seen in a long time. Nolan did not want to debate, Doug, who threw harder, him or Miz. But I thought it would be really fun for people to just hear from Nolan, because we don't hear from him nearly enough now. And also because our friend Tim Brown just wrote a fantastic book on Nolan Ryan that was released this month. Highly recommend it. So let's listen to Nolan, okay? First, we're going to hear him talking about how the game has changed and how hitters used to try a lot harder not to strike out
Exactly.
back when he pitched. You got to hear Nolan weigh in on that.
Well, the game has changed. People throw their fastballs up a lot more than we ever did. We were taught to pitch down in the strike zone. times, and the fourth time up, they hit a home run, and they act like they did something special.
they strike out 3 times and hit a home run, and they act like they did something special. So that was a really funny line, made us both laugh out loud.
Yeah.
Here's the thing I love about Nolan. He delivers these lines and he never changes his tone. Not at all, right? What did you think, Doug?
Yeah, I mean, it was a joy to listen to his responses. And because you associate him with like a generational pitcher, just like he stood on his own. And the thing is, in his time, that was one thing, but still to this day, you just associate Nolan Ryan with just power pitching and the strikeouts and just domination and longevity, all these really elusive things to combine into one pitcher and do it for such a long period of time. And I know I came up in an era where certainly as a leadoff hitter or a guy not known for hitting 40 home runs, I really had to make contact. And it was a mandate to try to like move the runner, get the ball in play, 2-strike approach, choke up, all those things.
Those were the days.
That was required because the trade-off wasn't worth it to the team. That's how they sort of pitched it, at least. The idea that, okay, maybe if I keep swinging harder with 2 strikes, I hit 20 home runs or 22. But instead of, taking that all or nothing approach with 2 strikes, it was more of my responsibility to at least make something happen and create contact. And there's debates now about, well, what good is contact if it's weak contact? I don't know, but I know like the strikeout accomplished nothing from the standpoint of you didn't move a runner, you didn't make the defense try to do something to get you out. So I could, so even facing a guy like Nolan Ryan or these power pitchers, Randy Johnson, you still had this mindset that I got to at least get the ball in play and make contact and let them supply the power. So it's really different now. So you have a guy like Miz who's throwing this hard, and guys are like, I'm not choking up. I'm trying to hit it for, it's like the worst storm of like swing and miss in history, but that's what you have.
Yeah. By the way, the audio quality of Nolan was a little tinny.
It's on brand.
Wasn't studio quality, let's put it that way, but you can hear him. All right.
Well, that fits him perfectly, though. It's like he's working on like landlines, and because he's old school, and ironically, he throws harder than anybody, right?
Yeah, we're the new schoolers around here, and how'd that happen? So here's another one from Nolan. He told me at one point he thought that he used to average, ready for this, 150 pitches a start. And he once threw over 230, and that's documented. Okay. So I asked him if he thought he'd have thrown harder if he'd been asked to do what pitchers like Miz, are asked to do today, which is throw 90 pitches, 100 pitches. Okay. So listen to his answer to that question.
Oh, I don't think so. I threw as hard in the latter innings as I did in the early innings. So, I don't think it matters. And back in the days when we fished on a 4-man rotation, I don't think it matters because you condition yourself to do that.
Yeah, that is how they condition themselves to do that. Doug, do you agree with that? That he and those hard throwers of his era would not have thrown harder if they didn't have to throw 150 pitches a game?
Well, I mean, it's like the mindset, of trying to get through 9 innings. I refer to someone like Ron Darling even about how he wrote a book about the complete game. And what I loved about that book is each inning, he talked about the mentality required to get to the next inning. And it was certainly not an all or nothing approach. It wasn't like I'm throwing harder, harder, harder. And, throwing 230 pitches is unfathomable. I don't even know how he recovered in time to pitch 3 days later or, 4 days later or whatever it may have been. But the idea of throwing harder and throwing a lot, I see Jose Mesa. Guys used to throw long toss and, there was just a routine. Now, the other thing that always will go in Ryan's favor about what works, even if he was a unicorn, is that he had the longevity. You see a lot of guys today that have this, lightning arms and they're all hurt. Blake Snell and Glasnow, they just get hurt. The injuries are just part of the culture of pitching now. It's just an automatic. So I don't know, with all the technology, science, information, protecting pitchers, pitch counts and all this, people aren't necessarily healthier. So I don't know what the answer is, but I know that Steve Carlton threw 300 innings, that I know.
Yeah. See, he actually asked me at one point why I thought pitchers get hurt. So I told him, and he said, we weren't allowed to get hurt.
That sounds about right.
It was so good. All right, so we got one more here. I love this one because this is my proudest achievement in the entire conversation. I made Nolan Ryan laugh with this question. Let's hear it.
Well, one thing I know is your fastball had its own name, the Express. So can he be the hardest thrower if his fastball doesn't even have a name?
The hitters probably have a name for him.
I am so proud that I made him laugh. Okay. And then,
well, you made him cackle. That's the best part.
Yeah, and then he had like, what a great line. I'm sure the hitters probably have a name for it. So I think that's the height of Nolan Ryan humor right there. So I think he just challenged us, Doug.
He did.
To come up with a name.
Yeah.
For the Misiorowski fastball. And I think there are great possibilities here because we have a swing and a Miz, something like that. The Miserator. He induces a lot of misery. Okay, so he makes people swing and miz a lot. Yes. That's what I'm thinking, that there's something there. Yeah. I'm going to guess you have an idea or two. What should we call the Miz fastball?
Well, I created kind of categories. As you know, first of all, one was kind of the performing arts category. And since his name is Miz, I just went with Les Miserables, like Les Mis. And you are miserable in the batter's box. Good. I mean, you're in the miserable. So I think his fastball could be called the Jean Valjean. The Jean Valjean. All right. So, and then you say it fast enough, you don't even know. Or Javert, wasn't that was the, guy hunting him down. So I think you have to think of that he's hunting you or he's being hunted and nobody's successful. So I think you think in that category. Now, of course, I always go celestial on here, talking about Shohei Ohtani. And I think this one is actually simple. You just call it Stardust. Just Stardust. I mean, try to hit Stardust. Can you imagine hitting Stardust? I mean, no. It's microscopic, it's invisible, and it's teleports maybe. So I feel good. And then since I was a transportation engineer, I went to the bullet train. And it's called the Shinkansen. So I think since we are an international game, I think we embraced our Japanese culture, go into the dynamics of all our diverse voices. And the Shinkansen is the fastest bullet train out there, the magnetic levitation. So I think that's where I am. Those are my favorite. I think you go the Jean Valjean, you go the Stardust, or you go Shinkansen. Those are my top three.
They're good. The bullet train, actually, you could connect the dots from the Express to the bullet train. So that's got possibilities. I personally think that the Les Mis is the favorite in the clubhouse. I like that a lot. But here's what I really would like to do. I would love for the people who watch and listen to Starkville to take a shot at this. Okay, so the nominations are open to you, friends. Okay. You can email us your favorite names for the Miz Fastball at starkville@theathletic.com, or you can do it. You can call the Starkville hotline. Operators theoretically are standing by. We don't know any of those operators, but they are standing by. So check them out. The number to call is 347-313-8371. Got it? You don't have it. 347-313-8371. Ignore all that stuff Glanville just did. Write that number down. That'd be better. And if we get some good ones, we'll go through them next week, okay? But we have lots more fun stuff coming up this week, starting with one of the most charismatic team builders in baseball, Jerry Dipoto. He's coming up right after this. Doug, it's time to welcome in this week's special guest visitor to Starkville. And apparently it's a guy that you have in your book, back when he used to pitch for a living. That's a fact I know because it was the first thing that you texted us this morning. Okay. It's Jerry Dipoto, the president of baseball ops for those Seattle Mariners, joining us in the great outdoors of Washington State.
Yes.
Jerry, thanks for visiting us in Starkville.
I just recently found out that Starkville existed. I think this is magnificent. The two of you together is magical. It's magical. And Doug, I wouldn't get too crazy, man. I'm in many books. Many books.
One at bat, right? Well, I had 2 plate appearances, so not exactly a large sample.
Let's just get it out of the way. Doug remembers vividly the 2-run single that he hit off you at Wrigley. This was July 19th, 1997. So, Jerry, do you vividly remember that moment, or do you need Doug to jog your memory?
I would love to have my memory jogged, but right now there's a compartment in my brain that's called Memories of Wrigley Field that's locked off behind closed doors. It's not accessible. I would say if there were a field or a stadium that I pitched in through the years that taunted me or haunted me, or it was Wrigley Field. It was crazy how bad I pitched there. But that's not to take away from Doug's 2-run single, because I'm sure it was magnificent. But,
yeah, this is the bad news. Doug is going to tell us his version of that moment no matter what. So go ahead, Doug. Let's go.
Well, truth be told, I'm not sure I remember it. I did look it up, though.
Well, you just reminded us all of it.
I just had, my son just graduated high school. I'm like, how long ago was this? So now we're getting into 30 plus years now. So, but yeah, Wrigley was very good to me. Turner Field was my nightmare. So that's the field I wanted to never exist, ever. So, but yeah, I remember Jerry had a kind of funky motion. I remember that. I remember the timing mechanism. Had to watch him, and then kind of figure it out. But yeah, we overlapped quite a few years.
I remember so many days at Wrigley Field, and not to go down that rabbit hole, but I think there was a time where I got 2 losses on both ends of a doubleheader, if memory serves. I remember giving up a home run to Sammy Sosa that I believe hit the building across the street, and a guy came out of the window with the ball. It was not a pleasant place for me.
All right. Well, do we have to talk about any more of Jerry's Wrigley nightmares or Glanville's big moments? We don't really, right? Can we move on? What do you think?
I feel good. I feel complete now. I feel complete. Yes.
Okay. That's special. All right, let's move on. We got a lot to talk about with Jerry Dipoto. So first off, your team. As we record this, your Mariners are in first place. And if I had told you, Jerry, when you pulled into spring training, be the 3rd week of June, your 60 home run hitting catcher would be hitting 165, and he would have missed a month. And your closer would have an ERA over 5. And George Kirby, Brian Wu, Luis Castillo would all have ERAs over 4. Would you believe me if I'd said, oh, you'll be in first place right now?
I could pile more unbelievable, stuff on top of that, but no, I wouldn't have believed it. It's we have somehow managed to kind of keep afloat in an American League that's been pretty kind to us. Nobody's really pulled away outside of maybe the Yankees or the Rays. The American League has been very, I guess, competitive. There's a lot of parity, and it's hovering around 500 while we're waiting for our stars to really ignite. And it's been an up and down journey, but at the end of the day, the fact that we have had so many guys contribute, we've had an unbelievable first 3 months or 2.5 months from Randy Arozarena, who really went a long way toward carrying us. Maybe the best start in the first half history of Julio Rodriguez. Emerson Hancock is our feel-good story of the year and proves that player development is not linear. So we found a way to hang in, and I think once the troops start to return like they did yesterday, and that it bodes well for the next 3 months. We're in a pretty good position, I think.
Yeah, and you're also willing to do stuff that is probably outside a lot of teams' boxes. Like there's this never-ending story about your team and the piggyback, and You've done some experimenting with piggybacking two of your starters in the same game this year. And now you're going to do it with all 6 of your starters. So I'm sure people would be curious. How is this going to work? And why is it preferable to, say, a 6-man rotation?
So, I mean, it's funny, but in player development, we do this all the time, but it's primarily at the A-ball levels as we're trying to manage innings for, kids who were drafted out of high school a year or two prior, or, the college guy who was really maxed out the year before, and we're trying to limit the inning totals on the full season. So when we got into this very unique position where we have 6 healthy starting pitchers and I think one of the deepest staffs in the league, we didn't want to relegate one to the bullpen and lose the length of that pitcher because, this isn't really like the backup quarterback in an NFL game where you can send them to the sidelines and then in 3 weeks call them back and say, oh, go throw 6 innings. Once they go to the bullpen and that volume dissipates, you really, it's going to take as long as he was in the bullpen to build it back up again. And, that puts your season in jeopardy. So we came up with this idea of trying this piggyback in the big leagues. Objectively, it worked very well. We had 3 starts where I think combined Bryce Miller and Louis Castillo, it had something around a sub-2 ERA and I think a 30-4 strikeout to walk or something. It was pretty startling, but what it allowed us to do in a time of the season where our schedule includes an off day almost every week. So, we have for the next, we'll call it from now until the All-Star break, we have an off day every week. So in a 6-man rotation, like we just experienced for the last 10 days, in a 6-man rotation, our pitchers would only be pitching, once a week at most. So, that didn't go over well when presented to the group. Nobody wants to wait that long in between their outings. We had the challenge of trying to find out how to balance a 13-man pitching staff when 6 of your best 13 pitchers are starters. And then what we experienced for the last 10 days is when you run a 6-man rotation and you go through a 10-day road trip with no off days, the stress that you're putting on the leverage part of your bullpen is pretty heavy. You're now down 1 reliever and, instead of having 8 to go to, you only have 7. And when you're in close games night after night, that puts a lot of burden on that setup crew. And I think the wear and tear they felt for a couple of weeks was really cumbersome. So we decided to do this, share the load. Our pitchers, we sat down and, collaborated over, these are some options. What do you think? And this was the winner in the, what should we do from here? I guess lottery. And they chose door 3, which was, we'll all share the load.
Well, Jerry, I mean, talk to us about the actual communication strategy behind, when you have these sort of unique approaches and you have the mentality of starters that are supposed to kind of, get their 7 in or 6, how does it flow through you, Dan Wilson, to really kind of get the buy-in? Because you mentioned this, started in sort of an A-ball level, so they were familiar, but the big league guys that have had, years of experience have to kind of really shift the mindset. So what was that like?
I want to say, when we communicated this initially, we let Bryce and Louie know, I would say about 5 days or so in advance of the first piggyback, which was against the Chicago White Sox. Along the way, we didn't give them enough detail as to how we would manage it and what the goals were. And, that's a lesson learned. The goal was that, in that particular instance, Bryce would go out and throw the first 5 and we would pull the plug if we needed a reliever to, we call pivot, to bail us out of an inning. A reliever would bail us out and then Louis would start the next, full inning. And the goal was, if all goes perfect, we have a 5 and a 4 and we get to the end of a 9-inning game and 2 starters carried the water and the relievers got a day off and we win a game. And it almost worked to perfection that first night, with the exception being Bryce went out and had what was probably the best 5+ innings of his career and took a no-hitter into the 6th inning. And we had to adjust on the fly. And when you're there was no communication how we would handle something like that, and obviously the game took the wrong turn. We did have to pivot out of Bryce in the 6th inning. Louis came in and we wound up losing the game in the 9th inning that night, but it was I think a 2-1 game where we gave up one hit that left the infield, and it's unfortunate, but it gave us an opportunity to recognize where the holes were in the communication and to be more detailed about what we were trying to get to and what the goals were for the staff in general, providing the relievers with a bit of an off day, keeping our starters stretched out. At the time, I believe our communication was, we're just trying to find a way to balance 6 starters without asking guys to pitch once a week. So, and at the time, if you recall, Bryce Miller was coming back off an extended stay on the IL, to that point, the entire season. And Luis Castillo was the starter who had struggled most to that point in the year. So that was an opportunity to bring Bryce back in at a pitch count or total of where he was expected to run about 85 pitches anyway. And Luis Castillo could come back and maybe try to get his season going a little bit. We didn't do a great job of communicating all the various reasons why we were doing it, only to say we're trying to keep everybody stretched out. And, history tells you the more truth you share, the better it's received. And when we got to Sacramento, which was our next trip, we had the opportunity, to individually, one-off speak with Bryce and Louis instead of doing it in a room with 2 of them, and give someone the individual, I guess, the ability to speak out, share concerns where they didn't feel like they were saying something that might be offensive to a teammate. So I think we did a much better, job of it after that first game. And then maybe the biggest advocates for how this felt or what it did for the team were probably Bryce and Louis, because they experienced it for 3 starts and it went really well on the field. Obviously the results were good for our team. I don't know if it's really a long-term strategy, but it is, it's something that we feel like between now and the All-Star break, while we have those off days every week and while we're trying to manage, an overbooked starting rotation. I can't believe I'm saying that in my baseball life, but we've got 6 really. We have prospects on the doorstep who we also think are ready, and it's a good problem to have, and we're trying to find a creative way to balance it.
So, Jerry, I don't know if anybody's ever mentioned this to you before, but you make a lot of trades. So
I'm familiar with this
that's
assessment.
come up. Yeah. So I know our friends at Cespedes Barbecue keep track of this, and so they have you at 199 trades now since you took the job, which was 11 seasons ago, right? So here's what we would like you to do. We'd like you to make trade number 200 right here on the show. What are the chances you would do that?
Let me just call Neander, so we'll get it done.
Right.
I think there's 2 go-tos. If we want to do a trade really quickly, call Eric or call AJ Preller in San Diego, and we'll get something going pretty quick.
Yeah. So do you have a favorite trade that you've made or a perfect trade that you made? And I also wonder if maybe you have like some huge trade, your dream trade you tried to make, you almost made it, and you still think about. And if you could just kind of tell us how close you came and why it didn't happen. So both of those.
On the favorite trades end, the job, it torments you so much that you have favorites and then you have, the ones that haunt you, like your Wrigley Field of trades. Among my favorites, they're like your kids. You want to love them all, but the ones that really stand out, there are buy trades and sell trades. I love the trades that look like sells, but they're really fun buys. And, maybe the one that stands out most in that category was, in 2020 in the COVID season, which will probably just fly under people's radar forever. We at the trade deadline in 2020, our current bullpen coach, Austin Nola, was in the middle of a career season. He really was doing everything. On a scale of 80, his makeup was a 90, and he was kind of coveted by a number of teams. and the Padres were one of them. And if you remember that 2020 Padres team, I still think, that was the toolsiest major league team I've ever seen. Every guy that came out to throw was throwing upper 90s with some kind of wicked movement and an off the table, secondary pitch. It was Tatis and Machado, and there was just athletes flying all over the field. And AJ needed a catcher, and he had at the time what I think was probably regarded as the most robust or the deepest farm system in baseball. And he called and inquired on Nola, and I told him, nah, we just started a rebuild. We're not really interested in moving. He's under club control. He makes no money. He's good, and we think that like the leadership in the clubhouse is critical to this young team. And then he said, I will do something stupid. And I love when people say that, because it's usually me who's doing the stupid thing. And he presented a list of what seemed like a dozen names, and he said, we'll do multiples, you pick. And when I called back after we convened, our group got together and we came up with a list of players, and I called AJ back and I rattled off the four names that we wanted. And they were four names that were three names that were on his list and one name that was kind of a wild card that we added in. And we wound up sending them, and he reluctantly agreed. We sent two more pitchers his way to try to balance out the trade, because he was paying a good deal to get the catcher. But in the end, we wound up scoring Ty France, who was our first baseman for the next, 3+ years, made an all-star team, was central to the first team that made the postseason for us in a couple of decades. And maybe the biggest score was grabbing Andres Munoz, who was the wild card part of that trade, and, was rehabbing from Tommy John. And we told him, this is the piece that gets it over the edge for us. But where the story gets really fun is, after that trade, we hung up, and literally within an hour, he called me back and asked me if we would talk about trading Taylor Williams, who was in our bullpen, and at that time was our closer. And I want to say he had 4 or 5 saves. He was a guy that we'd picked up off the waiver wire from Milwaukee, and kind of the journeyman with a good arm who you could trust. And AJ was trying to build up that depth that allows you to go win a World Series, especially in a wonky year where guys may or may not wind up on your roster. As if you got COVID, you were going to be down for 10 days, 2 weeks, and it created this really weird balance. So for the next day or so, we exchanged what seemed like 20 names on players we would be interested or willing to do Taylor Williams for. And every one of them, AJ said no. And then, we went dark for a bit. And with 15 minutes left in the trade deadline, he called and said, come on, let's get this Williams thing done. And I said, all right. And we're sitting in what was then our war room, our bunker. And I'm sitting with Justin Hollander and a couple of our front office people. And we've got 15 minutes, which is really not enough time to do a trade, background medicals, checking with your baseball people, etc. And we just rattled it off. And, he's giving me names and I'm hitting mute. I'm asking our guys, hey, what do we got on so-and-so? And it's all happening in real time. And then, one of our analysts, actually now our assistant general manager, Joel Furman, said, hey, what about Matt Brash? We've only got, we don't have a scouting report, and we've only got 4 pitches, of data to work with from the offsite, but he's got a really interesting breaking ball, So I said, what about Matt Brash? And then he hit mute. He gets back on. And he said, all right, we'll do it. And we had to just do it on trust, no medicals, no, he was at their alt site, and, we did it. And then, the next day he walked over. We share a complex with the Padres in Arizona. He walked over to our complex, and our then farm director, Andy McKay, who was stationed in Arizona with the group in Peoria, saw Matt throw on the, on the line. And he said, he said, "Brother, I think we might have got something really special here." And Matt has gone on to be really one of the more dominant relievers in the league since that acquisition, and it was just one of those quirky, weird moments. And baseball history will shine. I think that's that was a transformative trade for us because it just gave us multiple impact players that could contribute to what has been a pretty good run for us.
Well, I'm curious about when you build this team, it's all the pieces, right? You acquire trade, and now you're talking about coming up through the system and development, and you have someone like Colt Emerson. And what has changed in the culture of locking up players where it happens before they even get to the big leagues? Like what's the evidence, and why has that become such a strategic asset?
I guess the evidence would point toward don't do this if it were, if you looked back over time. We were maybe an early mover on this. I won't say, a first mover. I believe that was the Phillies. But, we did this with Evan White, who was a top 50 or 60 prospect in the game for us, a first round draft in 2017. And it was, at that time, I want to say it was a 6-year deal with a couple of club options that would pay him $24 million guaranteed, which was very similar to a deal that the Phillies had done shortly before that with an infielder named Scott Kingery.
Yeah.
And that one didn't work out incredibly well over the long haul either. But, in theory, what it allows you to do is secure your most impactful young players at an early stage in their careers, and secure what should be the best years of their career. And, our goal and I said this to Colt when we were, going through this, our goal is we do 3 contracts with Colt. We draft him and we give him his bonus. We do this extension. And then when we get to the end of this extension and he's right in the middle of what should be the prime of his career, we get one more bite at the apple to make him a lifetime Mariner. It's a similar strategy to what we employed with Julio Rodriguez. It's the same conversation we had with Cal Raleigh. Albeit in Julio's case, he had 3 or 4 months of major league experience. In Cal's case, he had been he was a 3+ player. So, my history in the game tells me that the further you push into a player's career, the less likely it is that you're able to get the long deal done with that keeps your best players, in-house. And for teams like us, we are generally about as middle market as it gets, and we're not New York, we're not LA, we're not Chicago, but we're also not at the bottom of the food chain in terms of, revenues and fan appeal, et cetera. We're closer to middle of the pack or top third of the league in that. So we have to be really sensitive to making sure we're all about draft and develop and trade and build our roster in that way. But we also have the resources to be able to pay our stars and keep our stars as part of what we do. And that's kind of been the history of the Mariners. We've had an incredible number of players who've had long careers, historic careers as Mariners. And, we wanted to really tap into that. And I one of the sells with all these guys is, hey, sign the deal. We'll win our first World Series. You'll be the next guy with a statue out on Edgar Martinez Drive. I think something special is brewing. Colt Emerson is a special kid. I could talk about him for another half hour, and an exceptional player with the kind of makeup, leadership qualities, work ethic that you dream of on draft day. And I think he was almost immediately, embraced and respected when he came into the major league space at spring training 2 years ago as a 19-year-old or a year and a half ago as a 19-year-old. Really as good as it gets in terms of the way he interacts with teammates and obviously impacts the game in a lot of ways.
All right, it's time to tell people some stuff they don't know about you. There's a game on Baseball Reference called the Immaculate Grid, and people don't know this. The greatest grid player in the universe, according to my unimpeccable sources, is you. Okay, so you will drop names that are amazing. And I'm going to give some examples here, courtesy of a mutual friend of ours who might or might not be Tyler Kepner. You dropped
Who
the
also
name.
dropped some incredible names.
He does. Yes.
Yeah, right. So one of the names you dropped was famous 100 RBI All-Star Joe Vosmick.
Vosmick.
And there was the immortal 300 hitting center fielder. Is it Dode Pascart or Dodie
Pascart? Yeah.
Dodie. Yeah. So, Jerry, I like to think I know a lot of stuff. I'd never heard of those dudes. Why have you heard of those dudes?
So in addition to being whatever, like the baseball life that you would be able to track that dates, like Doug said, it goes back a lot of decades now. I grew up a baseball nut, just a fan of the game, the mad baseball card collector. As a teenager, I started collecting, baseball autographs and memorabilia, and that's a hobby that I took through like my major league career as a player, and I was to the point where I was actually trying to acquire an autograph or some type of artifact that represented every player that ever played, at that time. And that's how names like Dodie Pascart, and I probably spent way too much of my, middle school years rifling through, the baseball encyclopedia and looking at weird names or weird accomplishments and thinking, wow, tell me, why should I know who Pickles Dillhofer is? But, you need to know these things in your life.
Yeah, we're going to use that word need in a way that only we could understand. Have you ever used the name Doug Glanville in a grid?
No, it's too famous. It's like you have to, with the grid, you can't get too recent and you can't get too famous. And this is no knock. Dodie Pascart was a pretty good player in his time, but he played 100 years ago. Doug, albeit, 30 years ago, is like when you knock down 200 hits in a season and you're out there playing Gold Glove quality defense on good teams and, and you play long career, and the people who saw you play are the ones playing on the grid, you got no chance of that being a good score. Yeah. So you have to find ways to get black and white and weird mustaches and, and find those like the niche players.
Did you hear that, Doug? You're too famous.
Yeah. Well, I always figured there's like once you hit like 2% or something, you're done. Like you're hurting people's score. You got to be like under 1, under like 0.5. I guess it's like, how do you, it's one thing to know like the name of the player, but it's another to know their movement, because in this game you have to know like the teammates or so how do you get those layers together? That's what I'm blown away at.
Most of I said this to Kepner, most of it is in my mind. I'll remember their baseball cards, the photos from a baseball card, the hat they were wearing, or for years when I did actively, collect the autographs and I was trying to get, until we got to the point where there's 25,000 names and now there's roughly no shot. But, I would have a page in albums dedicated to each player. And at the bottom of the page, it would have like a career stat bar and the teams that they played for. So you just flip through the book, and as a matter of fact, at one point, the Sporting News was, they had sold off all of the contracts that they had signed with players, to represent their likeness or facsimile signature in the Sporting News when it was actively being published. And I bought all of this was when I was still playing. I bought all of the contracts, the waivers that these players signed starting in like 1919 and running through like 1943 or something. And the number of weird, like one team, 5 days as a big leaguer. We played a game recently where we had to make an emergency call up due to an injury replacement with Randy Arozarena. And we called up a 26-year-old A-ball player from our system named Curtis Washington Jr. Curtis is, he's been playing in Everett, which is 40 minutes from the stadium. He's been in our system since 2019. He's been a multiple time like community involvement award winner. He's a wonderful guy. I hope he winds up coaching for us after his minor league career is done. And he got a day in the big leagues as a result of this, quirky roster need. And, those are the types of names that somehow I'll remember on a grid 30 years from now, because, it's just a weird story. And I think the weird stories are the ones that are fun to tell.
So
Awesome.
because you were writing just like a lot of these players, trying to get signatures and artifacts, haven't you actually developed friendships with old time players just from writing to them back and forth?
I have, it's and through the 90s, especially, it was like my pen pals, and sadly, most of them have passed on, but guys who played in the 40s and the 50s. And, when I first wrote them letters, and then ascended to the major leagues and actually, had a career, and, they could say, oh, wow, I've been writing back and forth with him since X. And, I would get letters in the mail, and I actually was like a kid as a 30-year-old walking to the mailbox, excited about seeing who wrote me that day. And, the funny stories, the funny people you meet, just great guys in the game. And sometimes I would get to a ballpark, and a veteran player from the early 60s, or Lou Klimchak would come down and find me and say, "Are you the same guy who wrote me a letter?" And I said, "Yeah, that's me." And they're like, "No way." Another weird quirk of my baseball life that Kepner is aware of, in the summer of 1988, I was in college at the time, and I tore a tricep in the regionals that year, and I couldn't pitch summer ball. So the Richmond Braves, we shared a stadium. I went to Virginia Commonwealth University. We shared a stadium with the Richmond Braves, who at that time it was, Ron Gant and Tom Glavine and, John Smoltz, guys I would play against for the next, 10 years. And they were all in AAA. Derek Lilliquist, who became my teammate, and I became their clubhouse guy. They needed a road clubhouse guy, so they said, "Hey, you want to do the road clubhouse?" So I did it, and so for that year, all the guys that came through, at that time, it was like the AAA, at the American Association and the International League were combined for a very short period. I think it was like that 87, 88. And so all of the weird, like one shot Gibson Alba was a St. Louis Cardinal, and I shined his shoes. So I remember Gibson Alba, and you learn weird things, and I'm like the Walter Mitty of baseball. I've had some weird opportunities,
I mean, how has there not been like a March Madness tournament on like Immaculate Grid? I mean, someone's got to do it. I mean, we're Starkville. We have a virtual land here. Can't we create like a March Madness tournament on Immaculate Grid? I mean, that would be amazing.
I want to do that.
Count me in. I'm in.
Yeah, we actually talked about it. I had Aaron Boone interested, and Sam Fold, and Kepner. We'd have to include him in just for the sake of it.
Well, you got to do it. You got to do it.
I think, but wait. So March Madness has just expanded to what, 900 entrants. So we get challenging. Doug, I know you wanted to ask Jerry about Legendary Mariners.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
well, so sort of the other end of the guys who are really at the 99% in the Immaculate Grid, you have many storied Mariners that fall into that category. One of which, of course, Ichiro Suzuki. I'm curious about that side of the legacy of the Mariners, how it sustains, and someone like Ichiro in particular, if you have like any great memories with him.
I see Ichi every day, at least when we're at home. He works for the club, special assistant to the chairman. He still prepares every day with the same focus and diligence that he did when he was a player. He's wearing spikes. He's going through his long toss. And I think the way I've often expressed it is he is a representation or example of greatness that our young players get to watch every day. Magnificent in how detail oriented he is. I fondly remember when Ichi was playing for the Marlins, and he had recently taken on John Boggs as his agent. And, they don't come wired much better than John Boggs. Great guy, tremendous at what he does. And leading into 2018, so this was after the 2017 season, Ichi's now in the 3,000 hit club. And, the dream is that he kind of brings it in for a landing with a return to the Mariners. And, and we didn't have the roster spot to do it. And long story short, I'd nicknamed John. I said, God, you're like the elephant hunter riding behind me. That's like slowly plodding on top of the elephant with the big gun waiting, but he was there. And then, as it worked out, we got into spring training in 2018, and our left fielder at the time was Ben Gamble. And Ben was a young player who we were trying to develop and integrate younger players on what was a pretty old roster at the time. And he severely got his hamstring, and he was going to miss the better part of 2 months. So I called John and I said, Elephant Hunter, your ship has come in. Here's what we'd like to do. And we started discussing a 1-year major league deal for Ichiro that would allow us, in 2019, we were already scheduled to open our season in Tokyo. So the goal was to have Ichi join our roster in 18, finish his career as a Mariner, and effectively, retire as a Mariner in Tokyo in 2019, and then move on to a position like he has now as a full-time member of the organization. And they went for it. I will say there was some bumpy roads on the way to retirement, because I believe Ichi would still play. If you told him, hey, right field is yours, go get him, he'll be ready. And when we ultimately did sign him, we're setting up a press conference, because he's not the type of guy that just rolls into spring training in March and you say, oh, who's the new guy? So we had a press conference, and I was blown away. When we scheduled this press conference, we're talking about it like a quick presser. We'll do an intro for Ichiro, and I said, what are we going to wear? And he said, Ichi would prefer that we go casual, he may even go with a uniform, so for us, khakis and a golf shirt. And I said, great, perfect. That's what I'm wearing every day anyway. And, we get there for this press conference. There's about, 200 members of the Japanese media, and they're all sitting on the curb outside our facility at 7:30 in the morning. And the press conference, I believe, was at 11 a.m. And, they're out there. And I thought, what is this? This is like New Kids on the Block or something, or dropping in. Little later, Ichi comes rolling in 2 blacked out SUVs that pull through the gate into our building area. They close the gate, and I'm up in my office. Ichi walks up the back stairs and comes into my office. I had never met him. Our careers, my career ended as his was starting, and but I'd never met him before. But he walks into my office in what appeared to be about a $20,000 suit, with jet black hair, slick back, with sunglasses that I'm not sure I could afford on a single paycheck, and I'm wearing my Mariners polo and a pair of khakis, and I walk. I'm a pretty familiar person. I walked up to him, instead of shaking his hand, I backslapped him in the chest, and I said, I thought we were going casual, and he said, Jerry, this is casual for me. And I thought that's a mic drop. That's when you got it going on. But one of my favorite baseball memories is his retirement in Tokyo, which was just epic, and something that I'll never forget being present for, and having had the pleasure of being invited to Cooperstown to be there for his induction into the Hall of Fame is another one that just, you don't forget those moments in your life. So I'm really, really blessed to have experienced it.
As you know, I think Ichiro is the coolest player of all time. He just exudes like the cool factor.
Everything he does.
I
get it all. I got him. I got Junior. I got Jay Buhner. I got it's the epitome of cool. We're sitting in amongst it.
Yeah, what a group. Jerry, I don't want this conversation to end, but those, like the birds that are chirping in the background, you got laryngitis. So we should let them go.
The birds are like,
Hey, thank you so much. It's been so much fun to have you stop by Starkville, which Doug, he believes Starkville is a real place. We're going to go with that.
absolutely,
Okay?
absolutely, yes, yes. Especially as we kick off the Immaculate Grid tournament in 2028. So yeah,
Yeah,
that'll be
we're going to
awesome.
do this. All right.
We'll make it the
Hey,
new hardest trophy to win in sports.
Yeah. How big will our TV deal be? 0, probably, right?
Zero, but
I'm guessing it'll be a low pop. Yeah.
Yeah, right. You're looking at it. Hey, listen, man, thank you. All the best to you and to the Mariners. And please come back and visit us again. All right.
I love it, guys. Thank you for having me.
Strange but true.
It is time once again for our favorite segment of the week, Strange but True. And you know where we're going for this week's dose of strangeness, Doug?
Mhm.
We're going to Vegas, baby. Okay? The A's just played a 6-game homestand in Las Vegas because in a related development, they will be moving to Las Vegas in a couple of years. And Doug, this was our kind of homestand because the games were nuts. Okay, I know what happens in Vegas is supposed to stay in Vegas. I'm pretty sure some of the home runs that were hit in Vegas did not come down in Vegas. They came down in maybe Tahoe. I don't know.
Colorado.
So, yeah, let's get a taste of how it went. The A's go to Vegas.
Langoliers leads it off. First pitch, high drive to left. It's a Vegas bomb to tie the game in the first.
Left on left.
Oh boy, that ball is clipped big time by Bryce Terang. It's up and over the pool.
Here's Vaughn. As Andrew Vaughn, a fly ball to center, but that's it well. Bolte going back, looks up, and this ball is gone.
His only time up. High fly ball, right center field. Soderstrom gives the A's a big lead.
Second inning.
High fly ball to left. Nothing keeps the party going quite like a Gallo shot.
Nick Kurtz has struck out single and struck out.
High fly ball to left. Deep to left. Kurtz connects.
Leaning towards left field.
How about dead center? It's way back. And way gone for Bowers.
But with more power.
And as I say that, light tower power. Beyond the pool again.
Contreras at the plate. 2 for 4.
A drive. Deep center field. It is out of here.
This year.
High drive to right. It's a one-run game.
2-run homer back in the 3rd inning for Bryce. Ground ball hit towards the middle. Yelich coming home. The throw is offline. Yelich is safe. And the Brewers have the lead. 15-14. Patrick a strike away, an out away from winning this marathon in Vegas.
Got him.
Okay, you getting the picture? Oh,
Man,
that was 11 home runs. Not in the whole homestand. That was just in the first game of the week. Brewers 15, A's 14.
oh my goodness.
I read all about that one in last week's Weird and Wild column. Doug, let's run through it. So the A's in this game hit 7 home runs. They put 14 runs on the board. That seems good, right? They lost, Doug.
They did lose.
Does that seem kind of rare to you?
Seems very zero-ish, but I'll withhold judgment. Yes. 14 runs.
Well, it's the second game since 1900 in which any team did all that. 7 homers, 14 runs, didn't even win. Okay. So I called our friend Pat Murphy, manager of the Brewers, who told me it was the craziest game he's ever been a part of. And I said, all right, so when was the last time any team that you were managing, coaching, playing for, associated with, gave up 14 runs and 7 homers and won? And he said, and we struck out 20. Don't forget that. Okay, so they also struck out 20 A's. It was all in the most bizarre box score that you'll ever see. You want to hear another goofy thing I loved about that game, Doug? Time of game, 4:14. Doug,
wow.
What's the area code of Milwaukee?
It is 414, isn't it?
414. Right. So good. Before we move on, do you have any thoughts just on that game?
I mean, the 414, by the way, today's game, that's like a millennia. I mean, that's like, because everything's so fast. So that was, I mean, I thought of it from an announcer standpoint. And, you think about if you're playing a game of like, what do they call it? Like Pig or something, where you're, shooting hoops and you're always calling it. It's going to be off the backboard. So I just took time to write down some of these home runs. And I have like over the pool, off the scoreboard, off the umbrella, onto the freeway, put the E in Vegas, over the batter's eye, off the hostess tray, from a seated position and into the desert, and giving a Gila monster a concussion. So that's what I have so far. So very poetic. It's just, it wrote itself. I mean, it was really cool. I just felt like in the zone. The game wrote itself. Yes.
It did. Like, I'm glad you mentioned the William Contreras home run, because I think I wrote something like he swung from his caboose and landed on it. Okay, so that was just the first game of the homestand, 15-14, 29 runs.
Oh.
Did you happen to notice what the score was in the last game of the homestand?
I did not. What was the score?
It was, how about 23?
Well, that was the Rockies.
9.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Okay, right. Rockies 23.
Yes.
Brewers 9. So here's a good one for you, Glanville.
Yeah.
How many times would you guess that the Rockies have scored 23 runs in a game in all of their many years of putting up crazy numbers playing at Coors Field? How many times?
It seemed like with Larry Walker, Vinny Castillo, Ellis Burks, Galarraga. I would see. But for some reason it seems zero-ish because it sounds so impossible. Because Colorado is just a hitting, just go, go, go.
Yeah, you're so on to me. Zero remains a fantastic guess
23.
On this show. And how nuts is that? So the Rockies just set their team record for runs scored in a game, not at Coors.
Wow. That is crazy. Now, I'm curious about the new ballpark in Vegas. Where are the fences going to be? Because this is a serious concern here. I think they have to put it at a Nevada border, like where, let's just put the fences out there. And all the Komodo dragons out there, just watch out.
Yeah, well, there will be a dome and climate controls, and they'll probably go with
humidors?
20, 25 humidors
at least
to try to keep it under control.
Yeah.
Because this is what we learned. I'm going to get one more tidbit in. All right. So we had a game, starts the homestand with 29 runs scored. And then another game ends the homestand with 32 runs scored. Doug, let's see, I'll have you guess again. How many current ballparks, we got 30 of them, have ever hosted any homestand that included 2 games with at least 29 runs scored?
2 games in one homestand.
Had it happen twice. Yep.
Yeah, that sounds impossible, actually. So I'll go with 0. I mean, the Cubs-Phillies, I don't know what happened the rest of that series, but that sounds crazy.
I love how you think it through. That's good. It just because 0 just keeps coming up.
Keeps coming.
So obviously no current ballpark had ever seen this. The last time that any team had a homestand that included 2 games of 29 runs or more happened as recently as, I wish I had like a drum to beat here, as recently as 96 years ago. Okay, 1930, at one of the weirdest, most hitter-friendly ballparks ever, Baker Bowl. The 1930 Phillies had that happen in 3 different homestands.
Oh my goodness.
Hadn't happened since. And if you ever just go, Wikipedia this, just check out the dimensions of Baker Bowl, and you'll find out why Chuck Klein, for example, was a Hall of Famer. He had 90 doubles a year because I think the right field fence was something like 260 feet from the plate or whatever. But anyway, back to the note. They played back-to-back games there in 1930 where the score was 16-15 and 19-50. Okay.
Whoa.
That is so crazy. But this is not a Baker Bowl segment. This is supposed to be at Vegas.
It's like literally a bowl, like the size of a cereal bowl. That's awesome.
It wasn't shaped like a bowl. It would be a pretty weird shape for a bowl.
I would have a lot of home runs in that if I played in a cereal bowl. a lot.
Yeah, you would. But suppose you played in Vegas. Are you looking forward to more baseball in Vegas? Because it's coming up.
Yeah, I am. And the breakfast buffet. You had me at breakfast buffet. So yep.
Be a lot of buffets. I think we're going to look at it as baseball made for the Griswolds. And Doug, you know what I mean. It's a good thing. Trust me. All right. One more thing before we go. Doug, you're involved in a really cool project called Return of the Clowns. What should people know about it?
Yeah, very excited to be part of this project. I was able to sort of be the voice of narration about how the Indianapolis Clown, the Negro League team that really extended past the existence of the league into the late 80s and ultimately got sort of reconnected through Banana Ball, right? So you have all these teams, and the Clowns were kind of that first act of just like the showmanship aspect and just the fun and entertainment and laughs. And so really the inspiration of, Savannah Bananas and Banana Ball, is inspired for this sort of 20s, 30s, early teams through the Negro League, where the Indianapolis Clowns really took that mantle and kept kind of passing it on generation after generation. So, so Jesse Cole of Banana Baseball was really inspired by going to the Negro League Museum to bring them back. And he wanted to humbly sort of do it through educating people about the history. And sure enough, the Indianapolis Clowns are back. So I got to talk about that history and the complexities of it and just bring it forward to, today's game. And it's a really cool documentary. So it will be on ESPN streaming, and you'll be able to find it anywhere. So it was great to be part of it.
Great. So they're back as part of the Savannah Banana League, right?
Yes,
Banana Ball League. Oh,
yes. So
perfect.
The original Clowns, right?
Send them in. Okay, that's going to do it for this week's show. Remember, if you would like to be a part of this show, we can make that happen.
Yes.
You can call our Starkville hotline, can't you, Doug?
We can.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to do that, but if you're listening or watching, you could do that.
We have my phone here.
That number to call is 347-313-8371. Did you get that? You didn't. So 347-313-8371 is the number I hope you just wrote down. You can ask us a question about baseball or trivia. We just might answer it on this show. You can name Mrs. Fastball. We're hoping for more of that. Yeah. You can also email us at starkville@theathletic.com. But in the meantime, Doug, people should be sure to like us and subscribe on YouTube. Also, if you're not subscribing to Rates and Barrels, wherever you find your podcasts, what's up with that? So, Doug, thanks for playing. Thanks to Jerry Dipoto and those birds he was hanging out with for visiting us. Thanks to Jason Pateri for producing us and putting up with us. And thanks to you all for watching and listening. Doug and I will see you soon on
Starkville.
Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to hit that subscribe or follow button so you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed it, drop us a like, leave a rating, or sound off in the comments. We'll see you next time.